Hello and welcome. We are at the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa. Our guest today is UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Let's discuss the serious crisis in the eastern DRC. After North Kivu, South Kivu now seems to be in the hands of the M23 rebel group, reportedly supported by Rwanda, according to the UN and numerous Western capitals. Do you fear the worst, namely a war throughout the region?
Well, just yesterday, I issued an appeal calling for everything to come to an end immediately, for an immediate ceasefire. And luckily, we have seen that East African countries and the southern countries have met to come to an agreement. The agreement which was approved by the Peace and Security Council of the African Union. In addition to that, there were very clear demands in terms of having a ceasefire, but on top of which there were other agreements. An agreement to neutralize the FDLR, and also an agreement to withdraw Rwandan forces.
So that means several thousand Rwandan soldiers on Congolese soil.
Yes, so part of the agreement was to have these soldiers withdrawn from the region. In addition to that, there is a lot of diplomatic work going into making sure that there can be a space of dialogue so that there can be peace in the East Congo region. An important part of any agreement is to ensure the territorial integrity of the DRC.
You have met President Paul Kagame here. Do you feel he's listening to you? Because on the ground, the M23 continues its advance. A ceasefire seems distant. What did he tell you?
He said that he was open to finding a diplomatic solution. I certainly hope that we can find the conditions for us to, first and foremost, come to a ceasefire, for the situation to stabilize, and second, for the necessary steps to be taken for normalcy to return to the DRC. For that, an essential part is, as I was saying a little earlier, for the FDLR to be neutralized and for the Rwandan sources to be withdrawn from the area. On top of that, we need to find a solution for the M23. I think the fundamental principle is that all foreigners need to leave the Congo region. Those people who are Congolese, they need to find a way to live together in harmony with mutual respect, not taking into account any ethnic differences.
So when you hear the political leader of the rebellion, Corneille Nangaa, state that their objective isn't just Goma or Bukavu but Kinshasa,
I believe that it's a bluff.
You don't believe in it?
Well, it's typical of these sorts of situations. I don't believe it, and I think that such a thing would be completely unacceptable.
Now, moving on to Sudan, it's arguably the world's worst humanitarian crisis today. Everyone seems helpless. The fighting continues. General al-Burhan has announced plans to form a military government because he believes he's gaining the upper hand. Is that acceptable to you?
What they presented is a roadmap. It has some positive aspects and some aspects that aren't as positive. But it's a unilateral roadmap. What we need is, first and foremost, a ceasefire. I think we should make the most of Ramadan to increase pressure on those countries to come forward with a ceasefire. The international community needs to do all it can to put pressure on those countries continuing to provide weapons to the region. They need to stop doing it because these weapons are causing considerable tragedy for the Sudanese people. And ultimately, we need to have dialogue, serious dialogue between all parties. It needs to be coordinated by the international community. So far, we've seen numerous initiatives come through, but all of them have failed. So we need a well-coordinated initiative. The United Nations are ready to be part of it. And we need to do it so that both parties can come to a positive outcome.
Turning to the situation in Gaza, with a ceasefire that is holding somewhat, Donald Trump has announced his plan for Gaza, suggesting that Palestinians should move to Jordan, Egypt, or elsewhere. At the same time, some are concerned about what is happening in the West Bank, fearing that this could be the outline of a radical solution. How do you respond to this scenario?
Firstly, in the past few days, I issued an appeal for the hostages to be set free. Now, it wasn't necessarily my appeal, but it was the negotiations that have taken place which gave rise to the liberation of the first group of hostages. And the ceasefire has been upheld. At all costs, we need to ensure that fighting does not return to the Gaza region. It's an absolute essential part of negotiations with the involvement of Egypt, of Qatar, and hopefully the United States as well, so that the second and third phases which were agreed to can go through. Our ultimate goal is to avoid fighting ever return to the region, because the Gazan people have already suffered too much. On top of that, ethnic cleansing remains unacceptable in our modern world.
Is that what would happen if this scenario were implemented?
No, it's sending Palestinians out of Palestine is just not acceptable, in my opinion.
Would it be criminal in your eyes to do so?
We need more than that. There needs to be a program to rebuild Gaza, and I believe there was an initiative from the Arab nations to that effect. At the same time, we also need to recognize the fact that without progress being made towards a two-state solution, there will not be peace in the Middle East.
And just to conclude, there has been a conversation between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. You have often complained that the Security Council is paralyzed due to the tensions between the US, Russia, and even China. And even though some are a bit fearful, particularly in Ukraine, is it a positive sign that these presidents are talking?
The fact that there is dialogue is positive, but I'm not privy to the substance of their discussions. For us at the United Nations, there is a fundamental principle, and that's we believe in the Charter of the United Nations, international law, and thirdly, territorial integrity. These are the values that we need to uphold. Now, that said, all parties have every right to negotiate whatever solution they want. Now, us as the United Nations, it is our duty to say what the principles are that we need to uphold, the sorts of principles that we need so that the world is one governed by the rule of law, where the rule of law prevails.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary-General, for answering France 24's questions, and thank you for watching this program from Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.